Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Great Shot Kid, a podcast that's going to explore the creators of the Star Wars galaxy, all of the work that they do outside of that galaxy, and how it informs their work going into it. I am one of your hosts, John Mills, and with me is my good friend, Michael Schindler. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm excited, actually, to present this podcast to the world. The format here, in case anybody has any question about it, is we're looking at the Star Wars films through a lens of the creators that have come forward to put them together. For instance, our approach is that if you come into Star Wars, now known as Episode 4, A New Hope, and you see those credits for cinematographer Gil Taylor or writer-director George Lucas, what have they done outside of Star Wars? What did they do before Star Wars? And what about that work informs what you see? Do you see a pattern? Do you see something about that artist's work that can help enhance your enjoyment or possibly even give you little Easter eggs, little stylistic cues that you can look for throughout their work that you can see come in and inform and shape Star Wars? So, Mike, why don't you let everybody know what we're going to be looking at this week?
Well, there's a lot of Star Wars stuff which is going to be coming out in the near future, and that's just as exciting as the stuff that we have already seen, and there are as many exciting people working on those movies and television shows and comics and books and all the rest of it as there are who have worked on the old stuff. And, lots of times people will hear these names being, tossed out and saying, like, this guy is directing this movie or this woman is writing this movie, and people don't know what that means. They have no frame of reference. And Rogue One, which is the new movie, which is coming out soon, is one which is particularly interesting because there seem to be a lot of people involved behind the scenes on this film, particularly in the writing process. And I think it has a lot of people worried. And I think what we want to do is, maybe suggest or tell people that they don't really have that much to be worried about. Maybe they do. I don't know. Hey, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried. Are you worried?
No, I'm not particularly worried because I think that a lot of the concern comes from the fact that the process is so transparent nowadays. There are a lot of things that through time have had, last minute rewrites, some reshoots, somebody coming in and re-editing everything to give it a better flow or something, that responds to some feedback from early test audience screenings and those sorts of things. I mean, again, to keep it in the Star Wars universe, there was a cut of the film that was put together, and they later brought in the editing team to come in and reshape the endings. The first edit was sort of a toss-up between comedy sort of semi-spoofing what was happening to a very sort of dry THX 1138 feel. And so, if that process were happening now, people would be panicking. But I think you're right. If you look at the work of, what everybody's doing going into Rogue One, one of the names attached to it now is Christopher McQuarrie, who has a tremendous resume as a filmmaker, as a writer. And so if you were to, take a look through and say, well, what has he written? Why would you bring Christopher McQuarrie in? He has a heck of a resume. What would jump out to you? What would you look at in his list of things that he's done and you would say, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'd love that guy to be writing dialogue or a scene breakdown for me?
Well, I mean, he did win an Oscar for his very first screenplay, Usual Suspects, which I think, really does, lend itself to some reassuredness or something.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's interesting, and I mean, one of the things that he's known for is kind of like being a script doctor, like helping out, movies when they need it, and that's not an uncommon thing. I mean, the very first movie, episode 4, had some work done on it by I believe Brian De Palma and also Willard Hike and Gloria Katz, if I'm not mistaken.
They did a lot. If you look at Laurent Boudreau's annotated screenplays, they're actually, he, just to make it easier, he just put asterisks next to all of the dialogue that they helped rewrite, and there are a lot of asterisks on that script.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Going all the way up to the prequels, with Carrie Fisher coming on to write dialogue and scenes for certain pieces in the prequels, which is really, really interesting. So yeah, I mean, should we go back to the beginning and
sure,
this
yeah, no,
chronologically?
that's a great call. Yeah, let's go back to the beginning, because the first name that created sort of a splash attached to it was Gary Whitta.
Even before that, John Knoll.
Ah, yes, that's right, John Knoll.
Which is really interesting, because he's not, traditionally speaking, a writer.
That's true.
He is an Oscar-winning visual effects, producer who did, the visual effects for, well, he won his Oscar for, I think, Pirates of the Caribbean 2, but he also worked on the prequels. He worked on the special editions. I mean, he's worked on everything. He's one of the tops, the absolute tops in the business.
I believe he even had a hand in the invention of Photoshop.
Yeah, because his brother was like the guy who invented it, right? Yeah,
yes.
So he was, and he was involved in that. I mean, come on, Yeah. But, just like every other person, I'm sure, who works at ILM, just because of the nature of, being a movie fan and everything, he's obviously a huge Star Wars fan.
Sure,
right?
sure. I mean, he's got a story credit now, and just because for anybody who hasn't heard Mike and I have a discussion previously, Mike possesses a vast knowledge of the filmmaking process, one that from which I've learned through the years. So
don't oversell that too much.
Well, compared to me, I mean, granted, that's a low bar. However, why would Knoll? I mean, Knoll is credited as a writer, a story by at this point, but I believe that there's some talk about the fact that there was a screenplay, but it's been so rewritten that aren't the WGA rules that it now falls back. They get a story credit because it's like the Sowards versus Meyer Star Trek II thing happening, or even the Denny Martin Flynn credit on Star Trek VI.
Yeah, a lot of it is based on like arbitration and stuff like that, and it's not uncommon for someone to come in and write like a draft of a screenplay and have it rewritten so heavily that basically what's left doesn't really resemble what they wrote in the first place, but maybe there are key, elements which are still there, and in that case they would get like a story by credit. Now in the case of John Knoll, I think he's talked about it, or other people have talked about it, where since he has an in at Lucasfilm, he was given the right, I guess, to pitch a story once it was revealed that they were going to be doing these standalone things. And as legend has it, this was the first story that Kathleen Kennedy heard pitched to her, and apparently it was an idea which Knoll had been kicking around for years and years and years. He would just like everyone does, just like we do, like, wouldn't it be cool if they did a thing where blah 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 happened? I mean, everyone does that, and obviously the people working at ILM do that too, and he would do that, and here was his chance, and how could he let that go by? Because even though he's not a writer by trade, that's not to say that he's not a storyteller. I mean, you look at the stuff in the prequels, and it's like he is definitely a storyteller.
Well, I mean, considering how much we know that Lucas tossed over to the because in the script it would say like they fight or the battle begins, and the visual effects department, he would say, okay, put something together, give me the animatics, let me see what it's going to look like, and then, we'll help shape it in the editing booth. And a great example of that actually is the what the effects department worked up for the Jango Fett Obi-Wan fight was originally like this big 20-minute battle. And then Lucas, being Lucas, was like, okay, I see where you're going. And he just like chopped everything down, and we got the terrific little fist fight that we got in Attack of the Clones. So, yeah, I mean, all that just to say, I think you have a very valid point where, you know, he might not have previous screenwriting credits, but he's obviously been crafting things for some time.
But that being said, I would imagine that even though he had a killer idea from the sounds of it, and you know, something which is good enough for a studio to purchase and turn into a major motion picture, they probably weren't going to hand him the responsibility of turning out a 120-page screenplay after not writing anything, you know, in his life.
Fair bet.
So it only makes sense that they would hire an established screenwriter to come in and write the actual script of this movie. And the person who they hired was Gary Whitta.
Yes.
Now, Gary Whitta, very interesting story, you know, in his own right. He was a magazine editor who became a screenwriter, and he's written 2 movies up till now. He wrote The Book of Eli, which was directed by the Hughes brothers, starring Denzel Washington. And then he wrote After Earth, which was directed by M. Night Shyamalan, starring...
and received quite warmly by critics and audiences alike, Mike.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. I don't know. Have you seen The Book of Eli?
I have seen Book of Eli. I actually truly, deeply enjoy Book of Eli. Book of Eli hits that sweet spot that just it's like ringing the church bell for me. I was like, that's my type of movie right there. What did you think of it?
I did not like that movie at all.
Okay. No, hey, fair enough.
I know it has a really big cult following, you know. There's a lot of people out there who like The Book of Eli. I'm not one of them.
I will say that the film is very largely powered just by the charisma of Denzel Washington. I mean, Denzel Washington's one of those actors where I freely admit he walks on screen and like the movie goes up by a star because I'm like, all right, hey, how you doing, Denzel? Let's hang out.
Yeah.
The only movie that never had benefit of that charm was John Q, but that's a whole other story. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed Book of Eli, but again, I freely admit that it navigated that stone needle. It like went right through and hit right where it needed to for me as an audience member. So
yeah, it didn't quite work for me. And After Earth, did you see that?
No, that's definitely an example of the reviews kept me far, far away from the theater.
See, I'll see anything M. Night Shyamalan does because he's made 2 legitimate masterpieces, in my opinion, and, you know, that's enough to get me in the theater no matter what. And
you better not say that Lady in the Water was one of them.
No, although I do think that's a
okay,
very
keep moving.
movie.
So you saw After Earth. Yeah.
Yes. I saw After Earth, and it's as bad as everyone says, So
basically, we're establishing that his 2 credits coming into Rogue One, we should actually be very happy that we've heard about these rewrites that have happened on the script.
So I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, you know, who knows like what his original script for After Earth was, or actually it was based on an idea by Will Smith, I think. But you know, it's one of those things where, you know, who knows what's going on, you know, behind the scenes. Who knows what other spec scripts he wrote, which may have, you know, gotten him the job here. But one thing which is clear based on his online persona is that he is very much a Star Wars fan, and he understands that world, I think, completely. Maybe you would disagree with that, but I don't know.
He's definitely a fan of a certain type. Like he's, you know, that's a whole, I guess, argument for another day. But I would say that Gary Whitta is a more, he's like the type of Van Halen fan that only likes David Lee Roth and hates Sammy Hagar, whereas, you know, I would be the type of fan that embraces both and maybe even prefers Sammy Hagar. Who knows?
Right, so you're weird. That's cool. That's cool.
That hurts, man. That just hurts.
Oh, you know that's weird. That's not.
It is
that's
not. It is not weird. Hagar is so much, but anyway.
Okay.
Hagar better than Roth. Period. In a sense. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So yeah, after writing, one draft of this screenplay, Whitta was replaced by another writer. And now, because there has been so much, in terms of rewrites and everything, even though Gary Whitta did write one draft of the screenplay, his credit is a story by credit as well.
Yeah.
This is an example of that. Now, it doesn't seem like there's any ill will on the part of either party. It's quite possible that he was busy and they just couldn't bring him in to do another draft. Or it's quite possible that, they thought it needed fresh eyes, which is the thing, which, is it's the dreaded, whatever, thing that everyone sort of thinks is the sign of doom and gloom on a movie. But I see the value in that for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I can definitely see, like, even the best writer getting to a point where they can't see the forest through the trees and someone else needs to come in and take a look at it and figure out how to hack that Gibson. And in this case, it sounds like Chris Weitz was that guy.
Yeah, and he's got Disney experience. So that explains his connection, why they would bring him in. It was Cinderella. It was Brain on Cinderella he wrote.
Yeah, he wrote that. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, but I think there were other drafts of that screenplay or whatever, Disney was trying to figure out how to do it, and I think he's the guy who came in and figured it out in the end. I could be wrong about that, but I seem to remember hearing that.
Now, I think that our opinions diverge on Cinderella as well, because I found it to be, I was curmudgeonly. The kids wanted to see it, and I was like, oh, I don't want to watch this. And the first 5 or 10 minutes, my wife keeps hitting me in the ribs. She's like, shut up, just go along with it. And once I went along with it, I found it to be a delightful little film to watch. Did you also embrace Cinderella?
No, not really. It was one of those movies where I felt obligated to watch for the longest time because I do like Kenneth Branagh quite a bit. I do like Chris Weitz quite a bit. And everyone was saying that it was really good. My mom would not shut up about this movie. And I'm like, okay, I know that I need to see this eventually, and I will. And then when, it was announced that Weitz was doing Rogue One, I was like, now I know I really need to see this. And I finally bit the bullet last night and watched it, and I have to say that it wasn't that great. I didn't think it was apocalyptically bad, but I didn't think it was good.
Now, see, that's another thing that I want anybody new to the show to know. We give ourselves homework, but it's a fun sort of homework. Like you just said, you heard Chris Weitz is coming in, and he worked on Rogue One. And so this is a thing that we do. And this is what you're going to see informs the show as well, is we'll sit there and we'll say, okay, well, what else did they do? And we'll get the list of things, and and we'll even discuss it here on air about, the different movies that, the person wrote or that they directed or, even in some cases starred in, and those sorts of things. So, I just wanted to take the opportunity to let everybody know that you can look forward to a fun sort of homework with our show, so long as we're doing it. So Cinderella didn't land on it for you. Have you seen anything else that Weitz has written that you did like?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Weitz going, way back, and it's one of those things where he does a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff. He's not just a writer; he's also a director and a producer, and he's really good at all of those things. And I think that that's really kind of cool. So when I heard Weitz's name, I was like, my ears immediately perked up. I'm like, ooh, I'm excited to see Chris Weitz working on a Star Wars movie. And then when I looked back at his writing credits, I was like, well, there's a lot of things he wrote that I didn't like, but I like Chris Weitz as a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And one of the things which he did write, which I do like quite a bit, is the first DreamWorks animated movie, Ants.
Oh yeah,
which starred Woody Allen and Sylvester Stallone. And
okay,
everyone.
So Ants was the one with Woody Allen. I know there was another one, a competing one from A Bug's Life.
Bug's Life
from
yeah.
Pixar.
Yeah, and everyone loved Bug's Life and thought that Ants was pretty good. I loved Ants and thought that Bug's Life was pretty good. And, he co-wrote that with his brother. Early on in their career, Chris and Paul Weitz had sort of like a Coen brothers collaboration going on. Like even with the first thing, the thing which really stands out to me in his career, American Pie. Like Paul Weitz is listed as the director and Chris Weitz is listed as the producer, but in reality they did both things. And when it came to their second movie, Down to Earth, they're both co-credited as directors and producers. But let's go back to American Pie.
Let's go back.
There's a historical component to this, but just first off, I love American Pie. I love it so much. I cannot get enough of the first American Pie. I think it's great. Do you like it?
I thought it was very good. My favorite part of it was Eugene Levy, because I like Eugene Levy, and I think that he is funny no matter what he's in. I didn't have quite the same truly amazingly positive reaction that a lot of my friends did to it, but I did enjoy it. I do think it's funny. I think that it was a well-made modern American sexual comedy, that was fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it had to do with the fact that I was basically the same age as the characters in there. I had just graduated from high school the year before and everything. But 1999, arguably the best year in movie history, if you ask me. And that summer was a magical summer for movies. And in a lot of ways, when I look back at it, I think of it as starting with episode 1 and ending with American Pie. It's just kind of like a nice bookend, to that glorious summer, that glorious movie watching summer. So when I heard that Chris Weitz, the guy who was on the other end of that summer, was going to be writing a Star Wars movie, which was on the front end of that summer, I'm like, oh wow, that's just so perfect. It just mirrors everything, and then I started thinking about if you told 1999 me, someday there's going to be a standalone Star Wars movie, and it's going to be written by the guy who produced American Pie, I'd be like, what? The future is amazing. Oh, my God, I can't wait.
I probably would have told my friend that they were cut off and that they needed to just go home at that point.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And we should also mention that Weitz has also been nominated for an Oscar for his writing, and that was for About a Boy, a movie which he also directed.
Yes, which I never saw, but was very warmly received. I remember all of the positive press about it.
Yes, I totally remember all that positive press, too.
And you didn't see it?
Oh, no, I saw it.
Oh, you did? Oh,
yeah.
And I take it that possibly your opinion diverged?
A little bit.
Interesting.
That's not a good movie. But hey, it got nominated for an Oscar, so what do I know?
But was it as good as another film that he directed that was a very big mainstream hit, actually? Twilight Saga: New Moon.
I would say New Moon is better than About a Boy.
Ouch.
But I would not say that New Moon is good.
That's okay. Now, see, I have to see both now. I have to figure this one out.
Okay. I haven't seen The Golden Compass. I've heard some really bad things about that one as well.
He's even said bad things about that one. He was like, I basically couldn't get out of it, so I did this thing.
Yeah. One hidden gem in his filmography, I will say, is Down to Earth, which is a remake of Heaven Can Wait, starring Chris Rock in the Warren Beatty role.
Oh, I didn't know that was a remake.
Yeah,
Nice.
It is. It's good. It's really good. That was like their follow-up to American Pie, and it's really good. It's really funny. Definitely check that one out.
Okay, so basically, he did American Pie, and you really liked Ants. Is there anything about Cinderella's script? Like you weren't nuts about Cinderella, but looking at it from sort of like a I don't know, dialogue standpoint, or what was it that didn't gel? Was it just it didn't come together, or do you look at it and you say, it was a decent script, it just wasn't a great script?
The problem to me with Cinderella was that I don't really think it added anything to the story. Like, we all know that story. We could spell it out beat for beat, off the top of our heads. And when you're watching that on screen, I felt like he didn't add anything to it. I mean, the one thing which I thought he did seem to add to it was there was a lot more backstory in this one.
Mm-hmm.
At least it seemed like it, from what I was familiar with, which I guess is primarily the Disney cartoon. But I can totally see why Disney would approach him for Rogue One, because he did just do what they're looking for, which is write a script for a very successful movie. Cinderella was a huge hit for Disney, know, and they knew that they could trust him. I'm sure they know things behind the scenes, like his process and everything, which definitely suggested that he was someone capable of writing another draft of this screenplay, and that's what he did, apparently. So.
Yeah, but okay, and I think this is a good opportunity too, because this is something that still trips me up, because in the credits as they stand right now, there's and Tony Gilroy, not ampersand Tony Gilroy, but and Tony Gilroy. And the way I've always understood it, somebody explained it to me years ago, is when you see a screenplay and it says person's name and A&D, that means this person wrote a draft and then this person came in and rewrote the draft. Just did draft 2 of that. Whereas ampersand means that it's two people sitting in a room together, like Kurtzman and Orsi with Star Trek. They actually sat down in the room together, working together, throwing ideas back and forth. And so it's a truly collaborative sort of situation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So if you look at the credits, on this movie, it says story by John Knoll, A.N.D., Gary Whitta, screenplay by Chris Weitz, A.N.D., Tony Gilroy. And from what, people have been saying, behind the scenes, the info that has kind of come out on this, apparently Tony Gilroy's contribution to the script came after principal photography had ended. Essentially, Tony Gilroy has written the reshoot portion of the movie.
Okay. So if there was a scene that wasn't working that needed to be punched up and they knew they were going to reshoot it, Tony Gilroy is the guy where they said, listen, scene 2B, we need better dialogue here. We shot it. We viewed the rushes. We know that it's not going to work. So come on in. And so he would have been working parallel during the editing process.
Yeah, from what I understand. I mean, I guess one thing that we should mention before we get to Gilroy is that uncredited, it sounds like Christopher McQuarrie came in and did a little polish to Weitz's draft. So, like, whatever McQuarrie contributed to the movie is not enough for him to get a credit, but they were little fixes. It would be similar to what, Carrie Fisher did on the prequels, that
right.
kind of thing. And he's kind of known for doing that, but he's also someone who can be relied on because, like we were saying, I mean, he's got an Oscar for Usual Suspects, and more recently he's had kind of a renaissance as a director as well, with things like Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which just came out last year.
Which is a phenomenally wonderful film. Absolutely fantastic, beginning to finish. And anybody who doesn't think so is wrong.
Right, and he's working on the new Mission Impossible now, but he probably came in, did a polish on the draft before they went off to shoot, and then they shot it. Now, I mean, who knows exactly what happened, but, there's a lot of people reporting on things from what seem to be legitimate sources and stuff, and it sounds to me, at any rate, what happened was they shot the movie, they made an edit, they said, okay, we're having some problems. So they brought in Tony Gilroy to essentially look at what they had and give them suggestions, say like, what
right.
would you do? How would you fix it? And then he went off and rewrote a lot of, scenes or whatever, and then came back. Apparently, word on the street is that he was the second unit director during the reshoots, and that now he's heavily involved with the post-production and the editing and whatnot. And that, just from a historical standpoint, makes a lot of sense for two reasons. One, he pretty much did the same thing, at least in terms of like polishing the script, for Gareth Edwards' last movie, Godzilla.
Oh, I didn't know he did that with Godzilla.
Yeah,
Okay.
he did. And he has a history with Frank Marshall, who is, Kathleen Kennedy's husband, who is a producer in his own right, having produced a lot of movies, including the Bourne Identity movies.
Right.
And Gilroy wrote the original. Well, he wrote the first four Bourne movies, everything except for the last one. But with the Bourne Identity in particular, there were a lot of problems with that movie behind the scenes, and a lot of problems with the director, Doug Liman, and essentially Marshall fired Doug Liman, or he left, or whatever, and Marshall brought in Gilroy to recraft the movie into what it is today. So, Marshall, I guess, seeing that his wife was having the same problem with Rogue One, said, "Hey, I know a guy. Why don't you call in Gilroy?" And
so is there any reason though for people then to be nervous, or not nervous, but for any sort of alarm bell to go off about Gareth Edwards is still the director. He's still been touted as the director. He still went to Star Wars Celebration Europe as the director. So it's not that Gilroy is complete. He didn't completely blow up the movie. Like, this is still going to be Gareth Edwards' movie. It's just that Gilroy is working behind the scenes with him to get it completed, or is he sort of steering it? And they said to Edwards, "Okay, this is great, but he's gonna tweak this part right here."
Well, that, I don't know, that is the part that concerns me as a viewer, because it sounds like what's happening is that it is still a very collaborative effort, that Gareth Edwards is very much still involved in this thing, but that Tony Gilroy is the guy calling the shots. Okay. Who knows whether or not that's actually true, but based on what, people are reporting, legitimate news sources who apparently have, good connections, that's what's happening.
But I would say that there was one point where they were saying the same thing about Christopher McQuarrie, and Christopher McQuarrie came forward and he said, "You guys are full of bunk. That's not even close to what I was doing. Shut your yaps." But we haven't had Tony Gilroy come forward and make the same sort of definitive statement.
No, and if you look at like the news outlets that are reporting, the Gilroy stuff compared to the news outlets that were reporting the McQuarrie thing, it's a different I mean, it's like print publications and stuff like that. People who you would assume would do, their journalistic, whatever diligence and get their sources and everything. I mean, that, who knows how much that can be trusted too. Like, there is one report from Entertainment Weekly which was very thorough, which apparently came from them talking to very high up sources in Lucasfilm, which a lot of people think was damage control. They leaked the info to Entertainment Weekly as damage control for all these other stories which were popping up. So who knows, I mean, for sure. But it definitely seems like Gilroy is involved in some capacity, whether or not he's in control of the movie or Edwards is, who knows? We may not know that for years to come. And the thing that bothers me about that is, even if Gilroy is better suited to this task, and even if he is going to make what most people would consider to be a better movie, I still would like to think of movies as art, and I would still like to think that we're seeing an artist's vision, right? I know, especially when we're talking about, a Star Wars movie made by, the Walt Disney Company.
Right.
But I don't know.
Listen, we're in strange territory compared to when Lucas was running the show. Okay, this is totally different sort of mentality coming into things. But with Gilroy, regardless of everything else that's been put out there, we know that he's got a writing credit on it. We know that he's been heavily involved in it. So what is it in his resume that should give fans who might be, having a bit of a nervous moment of his involvement, what would you pick out of his repertoire for a reason to calm down and say, you know what, this guy knows what he's doing, and it's going to go well.
Well, I think you can look at two things which are kind of different in terms of the spectrum of filmmaking. One, the one that would jump out to you, I think more than anything, is Michael Clayton, since that was the one where he got nominated for Best Original Screenplay, and it was either Best Director or Best Picture that he was nominated for. I forget, but regardless of that, I mean, that's a great movie. I just watched that again this morning. And it's a fantastic movie and a wonderful screenplay. But I think sort of like closer to what we're looking at here, The Bourne Identity is sort of an example of a movie which everyone loves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that first movie in particular, really, really was a big hit and a critical success and everything. And it sounds like it was a movie which was in a lot of trouble. And Gilroy is the guy who, quote unquote, saved it. So that's really interesting. I would look at the other Bourne movies, even more so. I mean, the Bourne Ultimatum, I thought was an amazing movie, and the way that they sort of like jumped around with the timeline and everything was like really interesting. But I mean, what all these things have in common are, huge blockbuster action movie type of things, which are also very intelligent,
Yeah. See, I would sort of key in, as strange as this might sound, because we're dealing with the Empire, we're dealing with evil incarnate. In his resume is The Devil's Advocate, which I still maintain is just a delightfully fun movie to watch, and one that just, if he's going to come in and they're like, you know what, we need to make it more evilish. Well, all right, you picked the right guy here. He wrote a movie about the devil with Al Pacino that was actually pretty darn clever. It was a fun watch. So I would go to that. I would also go, I agree with you about the Bourne movies because they're in the same vein. They're franchise movies, they're action movies, but they're also intelligent action movies, as people might say.
So yeah, so you look at this, you look at these five people, and none of them are bad. None of them on their own, suggest that this movie is going to be terrible. They all have their unique qualities which they bring to it. And as they sort of progress in the production, I think you see their credits at least get better and better. I mean, they've got 3 Oscar nominees, 1 Oscar winner, working on this movie. Not counting the guy who won the Oscar for visual effects, coming out with the story. I mean,
those are the awards that they announce with some supermodel, and they play on fast forward during the ceremony, so they don't really count. So your prognosis on Rogue One is thumbs up. We're okay. We're not steering for an iceberg right now. We should all still be excited that this film is coming out because they've got quality people that have put it together.
I am. I mean, especially like, you hear someone like Tony Gilroy is writing it. Like, it could be anything, if they were like this movie, the new Twilight movie, the new Twilight movie is in trouble and they've brought Tony Gilroy in to punch up the script and take over, I'd be like, oh, now I need to see the new Twilight movie because who knows what Gilroy's going to do,
And if you spend enough time with us, folks, you too will hear news like, oh, Tony Gilroy is coming in to punch up the new Twilight movie. I guess I need to go see it. And occasionally you'll take a breath and you'll say, how did I get to this point? And it's us. We're going to do it to you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, we don't apologize. This is going to be a fun ride for everybody. And so we thank you for joining us on this first leg of our journey. We look forward to talking to you every week on Great Shot Kid, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.